Heck.
What?
I give up. No. I give up.
Okay. Anyway, so today we're talking about ADR, voiceover, and what's called Genny Operator or Generator Operator, which would be in the lighting department. The first two we're actually going to make a exercise out of. So we're going to ADR over some existing footage. For me and Priscilla, we're going to use our clip that we did for the other audio exercise, and we're going to ADR over that. And then we're going to add voiceover to it as well. And for everyone else, they can just grab some kind of existing clip from a movie or a scene or something they've done in the past and just ADR over that, and then add in some voiceover and its different parts, just so we can all get kind of a, huh?
Oh, I was gonna say, we think it might end up being pretty fun because you can take like whatever you want and just do a voiceover over it. So, you know, you might end up having some fun.
Yeah, you can change the lines or whatever. Just make sure it's like if their lips are seen, that you want to match their lips with whatever words they're saying. And if they're not seen, you can kind of add in or change the line to whatever you'd like, which is also done a lot in movies. So ADR is, it's actually called automated dialogue replacement. And it's the process of re-recording audio in a studio or offset to replace audio captured on set. So it's done because maybe there was an issue with sound. Maybe the take was really good, but there was a plane or a train or some other
just wind,
unforeseen, yeah, or a huge gust of wind or something unforeseen that came in and ruined the sound for the take, but the visual and the performance was really great. So they choose to go with that take anyway. They need to get the actor or the talent or whoever was on screen with the voiceover and with the dialogue, and they need to get them back in to re-record their dialogue to put it over the film so they can use new audio with it and still use that take. So then they do this process called ADR. It's also used for dubbing other languages over the footage and dialogue. So if you ever send it internationally, they will take it and they will have other actors or voice actors dub over the lines in their own language so that they can post it in movie theaters there and distribute it around that country, so that they can choose whether they want to hear it in its original language with subtitles or with dubbing, which can be more difficult to, well, it's definitely more difficult to lip sync. It never really matches up because the language is different, but it's just to get the audio to match with the performance in those cases. ADR is used when a scene or a filming environment has too much noise. That's another thing. If you're filming next to a construction site, then you're probably going to have to ADR a lot of your footage because there's going to be a lot of construction noise that isn't in the film or in the project you're doing. So you don't actually want that noise in your project. So you're going to have to ADR over it to take that out and replace it with just dialogue, and then add in some ambient noise and some outside sounds to make it sound more like you actually captured it on site. So ADR could be recorded in some kind of room like this, where the person is watching the screen or they're listening to the audio. There's two kinds of ADR. The first is visual ADR, where you're watching the scene and you watch it in a loop so that it's playing over and over again. And then you're trying to match how it looks, like the lip sync, trying to match the audio, your voice to the visuals of the lips moving on screen. And then there's audio ADR, where you are hearing the voice over and over again, and then you try to match how it's performed by saying it and repeating it over and over again. Usually in ADR sessions, they'll do both at the same time. So you'll hear it and see it, but depending on what it is, if they don't like the performance, they might not want you to actually hear it. They just want you to see it so that you can put in your own performance, or change the performance and make it better. So it depends on what they actually want for it, but most of the time if you are doing an ADR project or a session, then you will use both visual and audio elements to help them kind of match what they did in their original performance. Now, there's also, most of the time in a more professional setting, you'll have the actor in a separate booth where you can press a button and the director will be able to give them some direction and, oh, that was good, try doing it like this. And so they'll hear that in their headset, and then they'll be in their own room with their own soundproof space so that no other extra noise of the computer humming or the sound devices or anything else is getting into that audio. It's just their voice. And they don't hear anything except for their own voice or the director when they feel like talking to them. ADR is a very tedious and long process though. So they said, like, right up front, most of the videos were like, hey, don't rely on it. Don't count on it. Still try to get the best audio you can on set, because ADR is long. It takes a long time because it's hard to get back in that space. It's way less natural feeling. The talent has a much harder time matching their original performance, matching the speed and tone of how they said things. And even just getting a good performance out of them in general is a lot harder because they don't have anyone to play off of. They're not actually in that space anymore.
The sound will also sound completely different if they're not in the same position. It's just so much that can change, and it might not sound as organic or natural at all.
Right. And so that's why you always want to try to get it right on set, on location. Even if you know you're probably going to use ADR, still try to get it as best you can on set, because you never know. You might be able to use some of those clips, or you might be able to work around it somehow instead of having to go through this process, which can also be costly if you're trying to do it in a studio environment and you don't have one. Then you have to rent out some space and all of that. Also, bringing the actor back. If you're paying the actor, if it's a paid gig, you have to pay them for these ADR days as well. So that just adds extra costs. So that's another thing to consider if you're ever doing something like this. You always want to use the same mic you used on set, because you're trying to match the sound as best you can. That is if you're using partial ADR, where you're using most of the scene. If you're using the audio from set and most of it's good, but there's one take that just really wasn't good and it messed up, something with the audio went wrong, and you're retaking that, then you want to try to match that audio from the audio you got on set as closely as possible. So you want to use the same mic. You want to put it in the same position it was on set. So if it was over their head, if it was underneath, if it was going straight directly at them, however the mic was pointed, you want to make sure it's pointed the same way. This isn't as much of a necessity if you're ADRing the entire scene, because then it's going to sound however you want it to. But if you're trying to match audio and only take out part of the scene and replace it, you have to try to get it to sound like the rest of the scene as much as you can. So using the same equipment and the same positioning, having the actor in the same position as well. If they were sitting at a dinner scene, you want them to be sitting, because their voice is going to change. The way they speak and how fast and how quickly they move around and all these other things, excuse me, they're all going to change the way their voice, the way their voice is enunciated, and the way that their tone and their speed and all of these things change just from slight movements, slight changes in posture. All these things can have a great effect on how it sounds and how it can match to their original performance.
I think they also said something about, like, when you're dubbing or when you're doing ADR in general, isn't there like a specific tone that they have to take so that it blends naturally or something like that? I
Room
remember
tone.
hearing that. Yeah, but not just room tone, it was something else, wasn't it? Or was it just room tone?
When they're starting it out, they'll usually have that, like, the beeping, they're the what do they call them? Sound cue, where it's like beep, 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 beep.
And he was also like clapping to see
and it
how
counts down from 3 to 1, and then it starts. So they have like a visual and an audio cue for when to start performing. And so is that what you're talking about, Priscilla?
the video that we were watching,
Hello?
there was like a, oh, can you not hear me?
No.
Oh, well, you can hear me now, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, I went out to get the mail. That's probably why. So it's just because I remember one of the videos, the guy was talking about how he clapped to check how much reverb there was.
Oh
then,
yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. That was like later on.
Oh,
In the,
okay.
but yeah,
Sorry,
I
didn't mean
think
to-
that was something. I can't remember the exact name of that. I'll get to it. Thanks for reminding me.
What? Sorry, it cut.
Hmm?
It cut out. Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I just said I'll get to it. It's later on in my notes. That was one of the last things I think we learned.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just making sure I don't know the exact name, so I don't want to have to look for it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you're recording ADR, like you'll usually break down the clip into small chunks. So if you have a big scene or a big take where there's a lot of talking, there's going to be some kind of breaks and pauses in between, maybe at the end of a sentence. And then, there's that brief pause before they start speaking again. You'll take that and you'll break it up into different chunks so that it's a lot easier to re-record. It's a lot easier to match if it's in smaller chunks and smaller bits and get right. And so you might take like a sentence or half a sentence, wherever those breaks are, and just have that playing on a loop. And then eventually they'll be able to match it a lot easier. And then you do the next chunk exactly like that. You have it replay 10, 15 times. Maybe you play a few seconds beforehand of video just so they can warm up to it and get back into character a little bit before they start the actual take. But during the take where they're supposed to be performing, you keep repeating it to them. Keep looping it, it's called, where you're looping the audio, you're looping that video back to them over and over again. So it gets in their head and they can have an easier time of doing it exactly how they did it on set. So the first thing you want to do when you're doing ADR or voiceover or anything like this is you want to record in a room with little to no echo and reverb. You don't want to have a room that has all the sounds bouncing off the walls and coming back, because it's not going to sound anything like it did on set. And maybe that's one of the reasons you're ADRing in the first place. Maybe the sound you got on set is a big, wide open auditorium room where the sound is bouncing all over the place and making a huge amount of echo. And you can't really control that. So what they'll do is ADR it and then add in some echo and stuff so they can control how much there is and make it sound how they want, while also still sounding a little bit natural, even though it's not exactly how it would be. And that's what most films do, is they want control over everything. So they want to control that thing so they can decide how it sounds instead of just taking it as it is. And so when you're recording that ADR, you don't want it to have any echo. You want to have it sounding as clean and as crisp as possible so that you can choose how you want to affect it. And to do that, you want to go to a smaller room and try to soundproof it with something. There's the soundproof panels. There's those blankets we talked about, sound blankets, regular blankets, regular towels, anything you can take that can absorb sound. I've seen a lot of people say that a very cheap version, the poor man's version, is the going into a closet. Closets have the clothes that can pick up a lot of the noise, and they're very small and condensed. So there's not a lot of room for that sound to bounce around in. And those clothes will absorb the sound anyway. So it actually makes for a pretty good room if you don't have anything else and you don't have any kind of equipment or any space to be able to create your own kind of sound room area. That's a good alternative. Let me see. Oh, another thing we were talking about when we were talking about room tone. This is a huge thing when you want, if you're trying to match the audio, you want to make sure that on set you get that room tone. If you do not have the room tone, it's going to be a lot harder to blend that audio in. If you're just doing partial ADR, you're just taking part of the scene out and replacing it with re-recorded dialogue, re-recorded audio. You want to try to blend it as well as you can. And if you're not in the same room, that room tone is going to be completely different. So you want to try to make sure to always get room tone, not just for this, but for other reasons that we explained last time we were talking about room tone. But this is one of the reasons you want room tone, is because when you're recording this ADR and it's not in the same room, you can put the original room tone underneath the audio layer so that it sounds like it's coming from the same place. And it helps it to blend a lot easier without weird cuts from sounding like a little bit of a buzz when you're in a kitchen to sounding like something else when you're in a small closet. It's not going to have that same, the buzz isn't going to be there. So it's not going to sound the same. And you do want that. You want it to sound similar as you did when you were on set. So putting a room tone underneath from the original takes is always good if you're trying to blend the audio together. You also want to be sure to layer the sounds that would be in that environment that you shot in, so it sounds more realistic. If you're shooting outside in your actual scene and you're at the beach, and there's a lot of people and they're really noisy, and there's, the wind is getting into the mic and it's causing all sorts of sound and audio problems, so you're probably going to have to replace it later with ADR. You still want to add in some of those ambient sounds later on, after you're done with the ADR session. You don't just want it to have their voice, because it's not going to sound realistic. You want it to sound like it's coming from that environment. And to do that, you might add some sounds of waves. You might add some sounds of people talking in the distance without it being as loud as they really were at the beach. And you might add, a little bit of wind noise and a breeze or something. You might add whatever kind of sounds that can make it sound more like it really would if you were recording on location. And that'll really help people to pay attention to your story and not feel like something's off and something's weird and get taken out of it to think about what's wrong in the scene. Why is something wrong? You don't ever want people to think that. You want them to just believe it. You want them to believe that this is actually happening. You want them to believe that this is recorded here. So to do that, you want to layer your sound with other ambient noises and things that would come from the actual environment, so that it doesn't just sound like a really crisp and clean audio file. Because one of the main problems with ADR is it's a little bit too crisp, it's too clean, which makes it obviously stand out from how it really would sound in that environment, because that environment wasn't crisp, it wasn't clean, it would have some kind of noise going on. There'd be something that is not just like a perfect sound quality voice. There would be something going on other than just that. So adding all of that stuff really helps make it believable. Another thing ADR does is usually the mic is going to be a lot closer to your actor when you're ADRing. Like, you see how close this guy is to his, how close this guy is to his. Those are pretty close. And if you're actually shooting on set, most likely you're not going to be able to get the mic that close, because it's going to be in the frame. It's going to be in the shot. So what you have to do is, because the way the mics work is usually when you get closer, there's going to be a lot more of bass. There's going to be a lot more of a heavy, I don't know what to call it, but like the reverb and the bass that you hear in like lower frequencies, they get amped up the closer you get to a mic. And because of this, you usually want to have to edit it around and change it a little bit. And so you'll have an audio, you can do it in any kind of editing software. You can lower the low frequencies and kind of adjust it so that it's not coming out exactly like it would if you were in it. It doesn't sound like it's coming from a sound booth. It sounds more like it's coming from an environment that you recorded in, by taking down some of those lower frequencies and some of those things that tend to drop off the farther the mic is.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me see what else.
Guys, just so you know, we're sorry if I just thought I'd bring this up real quick. I still have to respond to a few emails. Me and Code have been sick these past few days, as he's holding out from coughing a bunch of times, but he's been coughing during the night and hasn't been able to sleep. So just letting you guys know that we're getting to them because I'm trying to like separate them while we're having the meeting here.
Sorry to hear that. Hope he feels better.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
just bad sleep and being coughing all night. You can't sleep and just stuff.
Right when I was able to fall asleep, I cough and then it wakes me up. So and it's like, gosh dang it. And then I have to restart
Yeah.
over from getting tired again.
And so I'm just doing that now. And I just wanted to say before I forget at the end of the meeting, because I'm highlighting a few emails now, that I'll try to respond to them tonight or tomorrow morning.
So back to the audio thing. Thanks for that, actually, because I was looking through my notes and that would have been a weird silence. Sometimes if you're recording an actor, sometimes they actually say like, oh, let's do a rehearsal before we start. That way they're a little more comfortable. And what one person said is it might actually be beneficial just to actually record that rehearsal. The actor's a little more comfortable. They don't think it's a recording. They think it's just a rehearsal. So they're just trying whatever. And it might actually turn out to be a really good take. So actually recording it and just saying it's a rehearsal, even though it really is a rehearsal, recording the rehearsal is a good way to maybe get a good take when the actor wasn't suspecting it.
Sometimes, and if it's really bad, you just don't tell them. If it was good, you're like, hey,
don't tell them
by the way, I was recording. But if it was really bad, you can just be like, okay, now let's do the real thing. Yeah.
But oftentimes, like an actor will stiffen up when it's the real take, when it's their first time doing it, especially.
Oh yeah, I'm just joking.
No. But so they will, stiffen up and they'll do it a little less naturally. And you want them to be as natural as possible because you need them to be the same way they were when they got into that character and they were on set, even though that's not necessarily the most natural either. But it still is a lot more natural than just speaking directly to a mic.
Yeah, but I can totally understand that because it's as soon as you hear, okay, we're recording now. Like if it were me, I'd totally be like, okay. So, I mean, of course, professional actors are more used to it, but at the same time, like sound, I feel like if it's just sound, this is just my opinion, but let me know if you guys, for the actors and the ones listening later, you can let me know. But I just feel like you become a little more self-conscious when it's just your voice and just sound. Because in acting, I don't know, you can focus more on the emotion coming out and less on the specific tone of your voice or how it's going to sound specifically or how believable it sounds.
Because the other thing about ADR is they're wearing the headset, which they're hearing their performance over and over again. And then they're also hearing their new performance over and again. And, sometimes they're hearing their voice already from their original performance, and then they're hearing their voice from their new performance to try to match the old one. And so that can probably feel very strange and weird because we're not used to that as, as regular humans talking.
Yeah, and there's so much focus on your voice too. So it's like, oh, I have to make my voice sound a specific way. And I just feel like it can be pretty easy to get caught up in like my voice, and kind of be nervous about the performance because of that. Because you don't have your facial expressions, you don't have anything else. It all has to come through with your voice and match those facial expressions you were making in the scene.
Yeah, it's the same thing. One of the voiceover things we're talking about is like sometimes lines can seem fine on page, but then when you're reading them out, it's a little bit harder, even though you thought it would be easy. Even if it's a good line, even if it's a good, well-written, concise line, it can still be a little harder to say, to speak. And the other thing about it is when we are talking to people regularly or like on a scene, in a scene, when they're reacting to other actors and stuff, and we all have facial, like she said, facial expressions, hand movement, gestures, and other things that we can help, that can help us to communicate what we're trying to say. And when it's ADR, it is just the voice. So you really start to notice that you have to make it clear and make it come off like it, so that the same kind of, what am I trying to say? So that it is, you can understand what the person's trying to say. You get what they're saying, even though they aren't using hand
And
gestures.
the same thing you
facial
were going for in the scene comes out in the booth, pretty much. Like the same emotion, the same intent, the same
Yeah.
energy. Yeah.
And also, sometimes on the set, these the actors are in their character and they're kind of feeding off of each other and the set, which is not present in the ADR room, which makes it very difficult. And also on top of that, as Loketa, you were mentioning that they're listening and re-listening to their voice, so they got a lot on their hands to make it come exactly the way they want it to be. So,
I've also
yeah,
heard,
so they get in their head a lot more, it's exactly what you don't want an actor to do.
I've also heard from voice actors that like you are trained when you're in a booth, like when you're doing voice acting, when you're doing like a TV show, like a cartoon or whatever, and you're the voice, that you are trained to overact a little bit because it's a cartoon and because you need all of those emotions to come out. But on the opposite end, when you're doing ADR, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have it sound exactly like it would if you were actually there, if you were actually playing that scene in person. So if a person does both voice acting and live action movies and is doing ADR for a scene, that can be kind of hard to get that notion out of your head. Like, oh, because you're so used to being in a booth and having to overact or like over enunciate or maybe be a little more expressive, that you're like, okay, no, I need to be just like I was on set. I feel like that can also.
Yeah, so a lot of difficulties can arise from this unnatural setting, and that is why you don't want it. You don't want to have to need it. If you need it, it's good to have it there so that it is a tool you can use and you can improve your stuff because of it, but you don't want to rely on it and you don't want to say, oh, we'll fix it later in ADR. Because one person even said when they're doing their actors, it took 100 tries for one piece of dialogue for them to get it a good take. So and they said that was out of 30 different pieces of dialogue they had to replace. So they were like, one took 100 takes, and that can happen depending on the actor, depending on the situation, depending on what's happening in the scene, how emotional it is, or how deep in character they need to be. All these different things come into play, and it's a lot harder to get right. So it can take a lot longer to get in that same headspace and to get in that same back into the character. ADR is a post-production thing as well. So they're done. They're moving on to other things, but then they get called back in to do ADR. Well, now they have to get back into that character again, and that can take time, and that can be harder to do because they weren't preparing it as much as they were in pre-production before principal photography took place.
And also remembering that if you are doing ADR, to blend them in really well and keep an ear out for that, see if it sounds natural, because you don't want it to be way too obvious. You don't want it to be sloppy. You need to make sure that it blends well, and mixing the natural sounds with like the room tone with the audio that you recorded, because sometimes it can sound way too clean, and then it's a whole other thing, a whole other issue.
All right, and so there's something called like EQ or equalization in audio editing audio editing software, EQ, equalization, and it helps to you can like edit the audio a little bit like I was talking about, make it sound like it's a little bit further away by lowering some of the lower frequencies or, raising some of the mid frequencies and stuff like that. The different adjustments will make it sound more like it's coming from on set, and different adjustments will make it sound like it is coming right on top of the mic. And so when you do start editing sound, you'll start to notice the stuff. The more you do, it starts to really affect how it sounds and make it sound worse, depending on like how far you go. So usually it's like this, how simple you can make it, the better. The less you do, the more it's going to be, the less, if you do like a little amount of editing, it's going to be better than no editing. But don't go too far with it, because different effects can have a huge change on how it comes out. I've edited some sound before of my own things, and the more you mess with these adjustments, the more it can sound like all of a sudden they're underwater, and it sounds kind of like a robot, or they just lose all the low frequencies of their voice, so it sounds very tinny or very weird. And so there's different effects that can really start to make these things very drastically sound different and sound a lot worse. But for the most part, if you use these things very, very lightly, it can really enhance it and make it be more believable. So keep that in mind as well. It is a learning process when you're doing stuff like this. That is why also, well, not that, but when you have the actor there and, it might take 100 takes and stuff like that, it's also a good reason why you need the director there at an ADR session. So if you can, get the director. If you are the director, good, be there, because you want to be able to coach the actor and kind of help them get through whatever hurdles they're running into, or if there's any problems, you want to be able to help them through it so that you can get that good take as quickly as possible. Oh, here's another note for the international thing. What they usually do is when they're sending a project internationally, they'll keep a separate M&E track, which is music and effects. And that'll be on a separate track from the dialogue. That way they can just take out the dialogue track and replace it with the new ADR track. So that was just like a little thing they were talking about. That's how they do it. That way they keep the sound, the music, all the sound effects and everything in the movie. They just replace only the dialogue. I already said that one. Let's see. Yeah.
You know where another pencil, where the title is?
No, I think it's in the bathroom or something, in Palmer's bathroom.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is what Priscilla was talking about earlier. When on set, when you're recording room tone, or like right after you're done recording room tone, you might want to get something called an impulse response. And that can happen by getting like 3 to 4 claps, just like, and like deep claps, not like very high claps where your hands are flat, but more like where you're cupping your hands together to make it like that instead of like that. If that sounded different. But anyway, like, so you want to cup your hands together and clap 3 to 4 times. That'll get the impulse response of the room, which will be how much reverb there was. And different audio editing software can grab that file, hear how much reverb there is, and kind of adjust it automatically. And then you can just kind of tweak it along. So that was something, and if you're getting somebody to edit your sound for you, this will really help them to speed up the process so that it doesn't take as long to get your audio sounding good. So it's always good to have your location sound person get the room tone, of course, but then also try to get that impulse response so they can really get the acoustics of the room and how spread out it is. And they want to get it near where the actor is, because that's where the mic is pointed. So wherever the actor was standing, you want to clap 3 to 4 times right around that area so you can hear how close they are to the walls, how big the room is, how much reverb there is, and how much echo is coming back into the mic. And that way they can really edit that. And when they're doing ADR, they can really take that and match how the room sounded and then control it to how they would like it to be. Like I was saying earlier with the echo, they can make it less or more echoey. And that happens with the impulse response with just like, I'm pretty sure that was like the poor man's version, clapping. I think there's like, actual equipment for it, but they said if you just really want to get a quick impulse response for your audio editor or for yourself later, that's the best way to do it. It's just clapping 3 to 4 times, cupping your hands, and getting all those noises and those echoes so you can edit it or adjust the ADR later when you do get into ADR recording. Another tip they gave is always be sure to get multiple varied takes. If they're going too quickly, then, tell them just get them to slow down a little bit. Or if they're changing the way they're saying it because they're going too quickly or too fast, because all they're trying to do is match the lip movement, then just try to get them to do varied takes, like different variations on it and different emphasis on different words, maybe. However you can get them to get it, because you always want as many takes as possible. Even if they're getting it perfect in sync, they are going to say it slightly differently each time. So you just want multiple takes just for that, because even if they're getting it perfect, you might like one performance over the other. So having multiple takes, having multiple versions that can work, and having multiple versions that work perfectly is always good to have more options later when you're trying to choose between which one you want to actually use to replace the audio. Movies do this a lot. I think I already said this earlier, but you can also use ADR to add or change lines when the performer's lips can't be seen in frame, or when you're trying to change certain words to be more TV and airline friendly. They showed what movie was it, honey? They showed Samuel L. Jackson in a plane.
Oh, Snakes on a Plane.
And he was, saying like mother effing this, mother effing that. And for the airline version or the TV safe version, because
so awful.
Because they don't do like curse words like that, he was like monkey fighting Monday through Friday plane.
No, yeah, it was this these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday through Friday plane. I was like, monkey, like the Monday through Friday thing I can forgive, but monkey, what does monkeys have to do with it? Oh my, yeah. I think
so ADR can also be used to make something like TV safe or airline safe if you're trying to show it in airlines and they don't want those the curse words and the M ratings. I mean, not M, that's video games. R ratings. Then they'll change words like that, and they don't care if it's lips match, if the lip sync matches on those circumstances. It's just about changing the words. But when you can't see their lips, it is used to
that one's just so they can make more money, so they don't really care if it's perfect or not.
Yeah, that is just so they can show it to more audience ages, pretty much, and to show it in spaces that don't want, like I said,
in that case it was like, well, this premise is so crazy and stupid, kids would love it. We need to clean this up though, because it's Samuel L. Jackson and he says mother effer a lot. Right. Yeah, true. So let's do that. And pretty much that's how it happened. At least that's how I imagine it happened in my head.
A lot of movies will use ADR to add and adjust the scene and story elements. Sometimes they'll feel like something's lacking there. And so whenever they cut to one actor, they'll have the other actor say something that in line with the scene that makes a little more sense to the next actor's response. Like if they feel like they got angry out of nowhere, they might cut to them and then have the other actor ADR a line that says like "screw you" or whatever they're going to say to get them to be a little more having a little more reason to be angry at them if it wasn't coming off in the scene and it wasn't making as much sense. There's also things like using a different voice actor. Star Wars is famous for this. They had the guy in the Darth Vader suit and he was doing all his lines. And if you watch the episode 4, the first one he made, you can see he's moving his fingers a lot more than, and then as he's talking, he's moving his fingers like for an extended amount of time. And that's because the other actor was, using his gesturing and his expressions to portray his lines. And whenever the voice actor James Earl Jones came in and did it, he
wasn't that expressive at all.
he was
But
a
he
little
also
bit
wasn't
quicker
as
with the
expressive.
voice, with the lines, and maybe I think they even changed some of the lines and what they were said, and so they changed a little bit of the
But
story that way because you
there's
can't
also the
see.
tonal difference because he wasn't as expressive. Like from the actor, the Darth Vader actor, you can definitely see a little more emotion in his hand gestures. When you hear James Earl Jones, it's a completely different performance because he's more calm and like subdued, which doesn't really match the body language very much in a few scenes. But
Right,
yeah,
but yet it still worked well enough because obviously that movie got huge. So you can still change certain things like that. You didn't see his mouth moving, so you could say whatever you want. You can change the lines to however you want. You can change the voice actor. It doesn't matter.
I
It doesn't
do
really need to
think,
match.
honey, let me know if I'm mistaken. Isn't there the original somewhere on YouTube or something of the guy acting it out?
Oh, yeah, the behind the scenes shows it a little bit,
Yeah, it's
and I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube.
it's very interesting.
Yeah, I can see why they changed it. Just I can see why they changed the guy, the voice of the guy. But anyway, so a lot of movies will do this. They'll just add us a line. They'll cut to something. They'll cut to another character. They'll cut to whatever, a random thing in the scene, and then they'll have a line said so that it makes more sense to the story. If you ever hear narration and stuff, some of that is added in post, even though it wasn't originally intended, just so they can kind of explain what's going on. And this will happen after like test footage and stuff like that, and people will be confused about, well, I don't get why this is happening. Sometimes they'll add in narration or they'll add in a voiceover to get
I will
more
note,
story
if I
elements
may,
out there so it makes more sense. What?
if I may, I will note from personal experience as someone who's begrudgingly had to watch a lot of dubbed movies in her life. It is interesting, and this is just like a little off topic, but it's very interesting to me. The different takes that different different actors that are doing voiceovers or the dubbing will choose for the character, that maybe like the performer that you see on the screen is choosing one type of, you can see it through his body language. Maybe if you watch the undubbed version, you can see it through his tone. And then when you watch the dub version, it's a completely different tone. It's a completely different take on the character, that sometimes can be detrimental to the story and sometimes it can be just different. So I think, and that was just interesting to see. Like when we were learning about this, it just got me thinking about it and like, wow, like that's true. There's so many movies that I remember watching as a kid that were like, I tried as much as I possibly could to not watch them dubbed, but sometimes you just had to watch them dubbed in Portuguese. So I used to watch them. And even in there was a while back where there was this movie on Netflix and I was like, Coda, I love this movie. I watched it with my dad when I was younger and it was in Portuguese, so I never knew that it wasn't an American film. And then we found out it was a French film. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a French film. And I would hear the tone of the main actor and I was like, that sounds nothing like the actor that I heard at first. And I loved that performance. So I was wondering, like, I wonder if I'd still like it, if it would still be a really good movie or not. And so, yeah, that's just a little tidbit that I thought was interesting to think about. And for the bilingual speakers over there to maybe check out some movies that you grew up hearing dubbed and then the original and see how they compare and if the performances are any different. Just thought that'd be interesting. It was interesting to me.
That's another thing about ADR though, is like sometimes you'll have the original actor even and you like their performance in ADR better than you like it on set, which is, awesome. That's perfect. Maybe they didn't.
Yeah, there have been cases of the original actor for example, like I think Antonio Banderas did the movie dubbed himself in some movies in Spanish, for example. And so he dubbed himself, and some people say that it was an even better interpretation because it was in his first language or something like that, because he was more comfortable with it.
Well, even just, I was meaning like, well, yeah, that's cool too, like the other language. But I was just meaning like, even if it's, they're both in Portuguese or they're both in English or whatever, sometimes you'll have the actor not do it so well on set because of whatever happened, they weren't in the right headspace, or there was too many people around and they got kind of nervous, or whatever was going on, that they didn't give the best performance with their voice. Their expressionism is still pretty good. And so in ADR, sometimes you can get a better performance than you even got on set with the original, even if it's the same language. If it's the same actor, sometimes they can give you a better performance just because they are in a different headspace and they're more into it at that point, or they just did it better for whatever reason.
On the same extreme, like we were talking about how an actor might feel nervous in the booth, you might have actors that have some social anxiety and actually feel more comfortable acting the scene when they have that space and when they have like that freedom to, not have so many people watching them, or just focus on the character. It's very personality based as well.
Yeah.
And that's why some people are better at voice acting work than they are at acting work too, because you see actors that are like, oh, like in movies he's a little more exaggerated, but in shows I love him. I keep forgetting the name of the actor because I love him so much, but I always forget his name. The guy who played Kronk, and he played the principal in Kim Possible and all that kind of stuff. He played so many cartoons, and I've always loved his voice. And then I saw him live action in a movie, and he was very a little more over the top and a little more like rigid. And I was like, I wonder if it's just because he's more used to voice acting. But that was just, I'm sorry, honey, if I'm giving like way too many like thoughts and not as many like.
No, you're good. I just don't know how to follow that up.
It's just these things make me think, and so it's like, oh, that's interesting,
Yeah, you're good. Anyway, so yeah, like she's saying, like some actors will be better in their own. Some actors will be better in this space. Some won't. Generally speaking, they won't, just because they won't be in that actual scene. They won't actually be in the space where it's more believable, especially if it's any kind of like huge set, like if you have Game of Thrones set, or something like that, where it's very believable right when you step on set that you're actually there. And then you get into the re-recording booth and you're like, oh, well, this now feels very less, you can't really like dive into it as much. You're not actually there. It feels very different. So then they might give off a lot worse of a performance just because it doesn't feel as real. It doesn't feel like they're actually in that scene.
Kind of like with the Dumbledore situation. Like even though it was on set, he didn't have like the realism because it was all in a green screen. So he felt a little stifled in acting out the scenes.
I guess.
No, remember like we saw the documentary, the Lord of the Rings one, and
Lord when he was, you said Harry Potter.
Oh, sorry, I said Dumbledore. It's because he also play it? No, I think I always get the actors mixed up, which
no, he didn't.
I always get the actors mixed up because they sounded so alike to me when I was a kid. Apologies to Sir, what's his name that I always forget his name as well. Gosh. But the guy who played Gandalf. Gosh, words.
Is it Sir Ian McKellen?
Yes, Sir Ian McKellen. Thank you for giving me Sir Ian McKellen. I'm terrible with names. And so I remember him having a lot of difficulty because he's classically trained. He's used to a whole set. He's used to that scenario, and he had to be on a green screen. So I can imagine it would be a similar experience if he had to do voiceover work as well.
Yeah, it's just because it doesn't feel as natural. It doesn't, you're not able to get into that character space as well because it's so obviously a studio that it just doesn't feel like it's, like you're actually there. So you can't get into it. It's harder to get into character. But with all that said, ADR is a very good tool. It's a very good process to help with any audio that was messing up on set, any problems you were having with the dialogue. If a performance wasn't that great and you kind of just want them to come in, their expressionism's good, and you want to keep the visual scene the visual take, but you don't want the audio take because you think that they could do a little better, or that that take didn't match the rest of it, so it doesn't flow. You can bring them in to try to get them to give a better performance. And so ADR is very useful. It's very good. And it's used in almost, well, I wouldn't say that, but it's used in a bunch of, movies, a bunch of large budget, small budget, all across the board. It's used all the time just because of how effective it is and how much you can do to control the audio at that point. With that being said, anytime you are recording ADR yourself or you're trying to get an actor to it, use one of these pop filters, that little thing in front of the mic. Looks like this. Right
Oh,
here.
yeah. They said that that's super important
Because once they're like looking at this mic and the mic's like directly at them from whatever direction, when they're talking into it, this is more so for voiceover, because ADR, you're supposed to have the mic pointed more at a direction like you would on set. So like, excuse me, in this picture, you see that the mic's pointed down at him. That's more like if somebody was holding it, a boom operator was operating the mic. That's a little bit more in line with how it would really be held on set. They still have the pop filter.
I think they also said something about how having the pop filter helps so that there isn't as much like spit coming through
Yep.
the mic, so it's clear, and also so it doesn't damage the mic, because they do have like those little openings and stuff. So
right, and so these are definitely used a lot more often, especially with voiceover work, because it doesn't matter about the mic placement. Voiceover work isn't meant to replace on-set dialogue and that type of stuff. It's just meant to be like a narration or something, or inner monologue, or whatever's going on, whatever you need voiceover for. The character of that puppy, maybe. So whatever you're using voiceover for, that's why you use these pop filters, because you're closer to the mic and the mic's maybe directly in front of the actor. When you're doing ADR, you can still use them, but they might not be as necessary, because you want that mic to be pointed in the same direction it was on set, which is going to be coming from above. And you don't really want your actor looking up at the mic and talking into it. You want him just talking straight on, watching the screen like this guy is in the picture. So they're not really going to be looking directly at the mic and giving off these these gusts of wind from their mouth, like they would if they were doing a voiceover. So
they do recommend though, right, that you use the same mic if you can.
Yeah, I said that.
So that's my question. Like, if you end up not able to, if you have to use that, well, I guess I wonder how much of a difference it would be. Like, I wish we could like see a comparison. One of the videos talked about it, but I didn't see any videos that showed like the direct comparison. I think they show differences in other aspects, but not using different mics.
It's because every single mic you use is going to have some kind of different way it records and internalizes that audio and makes it into that electrical signal.
But if you have the same mic in a different position,
transcodes,
you'd also have a different result, correct?
Yeah, if you have the same mic and you're putting it from underneath him, or you're putting it directly on him, when on set it was coming from above, you are also going to get a different sound, because the vocals are a bit different. You're picking up more of the hum of his throat, or you're picking up more of I don't know, like however the sound is directed. Direct sound is in waves, so it's going in one direction. And if you are picking up that sound from a different direction, you're going to be picking up different parts of it that you didn't from as if you were going from above. If you're picking it up from below, it's going to sound a lot different.
Yeah, that's one thing that I wish we could have found during the for the syllabus, is just direct comparisons, but those were a little harder to find.
We saw it with the shotgun mics.
Yeah, that is true. I just wish we could have seen like other examples to like see how big of a difference it is.
Just I'm sure you can look it up on YouTube.
Curiosity. Yeah.
If anyone's curious, yeah, just like Google that in, and I'm sure you can find it on YouTube, or just go to YouTube and put it in, and mic direction comparison. And then you can see the differences from one direction to another.
Yeah.
From the same mics. But yeah, so these pop filters, what they do, and like I said, they're usually used more so for for voiceover work because you're speaking directly into that mic. For ADR, they can be used for the like just in case, but they're not really needed as much because of where the direction of the mic is coming from. But these pop filters, they help keep, because whenever you pronounce words with P's or B's or different syllables, you will have these puffs of wind when you're speaking. And so if you're talking into a mic, because it's right by your mouth, when you say something like people, and you have that, and that's going to go into the mic and make a very noisy
That even
effect.
sounded disgusting. It sounds so good.
And so because of that, it's going to go directly into the mic and it's going to make it loud, kind of like if you were out in a windy environment. And that's what these pop filters are for. They disperse that gust of wind and put it to the sides. And like Priscilla said, they also keep it from getting any spit onto the mic. And because after time, a lot of that little tiny bits of spit can get into your mic and can start to affect it, degrade it, even ruin it or make it malfunction. So these pop filters really help, and that's what you want to do if you're ever recording any kind of voiceover or ADR. I would say use it just in case, even though you're probably not going to really need it as much because they shouldn't be talking directly into the mic. But either way, it's good to have for just in case. Does anyone have any questions or comments on ADR before we move on to voiceover?
I don't think so.
All right. Another
Like
thing
I
you
said,
want to
I'm
do if
sorry,
you're recording any
I,
kind of voiceover, you want to do these shock mounts. And there's different sizes, so be sure to get the right one. If you're whatever kind of mic you're using, there's different sizes because like this picture here, this condenser mic, I think that's condenser. It's a bit wider than a shotgun mic. So it's going to have a different shock mount. And these shock mounts just help to make sure that if there's any kind of accidental like bang on the desk or something like that, it's not going to wiggle that mic around and make it cause noise because they are very sensitive. They're sensitive because they want to pick up as much of that of those frequencies as they can. So you don't want them banging around and making slight noises like little thuds here and there. And that's what these are for, because they have a little bit of room. Right there, you put the mic in the middle, and then they just have these like little rubber bands. This is for a shotgun mic. And you'd put it in the middle, and then, or you'd like wrap it around two of them or whatever. And then like it kind of has a little bit of room to bounce around without making any noise. And it's the same thing with these condenser microphone ones. It has a little bit of room to jiggle around without hitting against anything, and that'll cause it to make noise. So usually you want something like this, like a pop filter and a shock mount when you're doing any kind of post-production sound work like voiceover or ADR. So I don't really have any pictures for voiceover, but it's kind of the same thing, just like that. So voiceovers used a lot for different projects depending on what you need. And as you can see in a lot of these, they're usually using those kind of condenser microphones with the pop filter. And because of the way the condenser microphone's made, they set it like that so that the pickup response, the polar pattern of the mic is directed right at the actor. So it's different than a shotgun mic where it's very directional. It is coming out of either the front end or the back end of that mic to pick up the sound. And so they have to set it up like that. And because of that, that's why you need those pop filters when you're doing this, because if you have it like this guy, which he should have a pop filter, every time he says anything that has a P or a B, it's going to make that gust of wind go into that mic and make a slightly noise. And you don't want that. So just keep that in mind. Get something like that. They're pretty cheap. It's not that bad. If you're recording a voiceover from home, again, you also want to do it in a room that's little distracting noise as possible. It's kind of the same as the ADR. You kind of want to just get in a room that doesn't have any echo, doesn't have any reverb, as little reverb as possible. Again, a closet. A lot of people say they like when they're starting out, when they were starting out in voice acting or something like that, they would just go into a closet and do it because it picks up all those, it doesn't pick up as much noise. It doesn't have as much noise bouncing around. And those clothes really absorb all the noise, and so that it's not bouncing around back into the mic and making echo and reverb. Oh, by the way, when they're using a pop filter, those things like the P's and the B's and those noises that they make, they're actually called plosives. That's the word used. So if someone ever says like you want to try to like negate those plosives, that just means they don't want to have any weird popping noises of like P's and B's and whatever else going into the mic. Usually when you're doing voiceover work or ADR, you want to keep yourself around 6 inches between you and the mic when recording. You don't want to be right up on it. You want to make sure you're, about half a foot or more away, but still close enough to pick up the best quality you can. You always want to do a level check before recording so that you're not recording it too quietly or too loudly and it's becoming distorted if you're getting louder during your take. So it's just like recording on location. You got to check it, wear headphones, listen to what's being recorded, listen to how it sounds. Are there any background noises that's coming in that you don't want? Is it something you can do to fix? Is there a fridge on, or is there the AC turning on and you didn't notice until you hear it in the mic? Because you're wearing the headset, you hear it, and then you can go turn off the AC while you record. Are there things like that? Are there background noises? Are there outside noises that you can't control? Is there anywhere you can go in the place that, really gets further away from that outside noise so it's less distracting? Those are all things you want to keep in mind and take into account when you're recording any kind of voiceover work or ADR. And so you always want to get as far away from those noises as possible and try to make that sound space as soundproof as possible as well. And check the levels like you would if you were recording on set. Make sure that the loudest you're going to get during that recording isn't going to go over or get to that 0 decibels mark and make it distort. And also that you're recording loud enough to where it's going to come out clean and you don't have to boost it in post, which can have the room tone also be boosted, which can make it sound a little bit uglier than if you got it right in the recording. So level check, listen to it, and make sure it sounds right. WAV, wave, or AIF files, they'll keep the quality really high, but they are larger files. And then you have MP3, which reduce some of the quality, but they can, because they have so much compression, and that will make the files a lot smaller. So it depends on how long the files are and what you need and things like that. But you want to be aware of which sound, like what you're recording it to, what kind of sound file you're making. So if you can use WAV or AIF files, because those will have the most quality. But if you don't have the storage space or for whatever reason you can't use those, then MP3 is usually used instead. 48 kilohertz is usually what you'll want to record your voiceover at. That's pretty standard for the industry, is 48 kilohertz. Like I said, the shock mount, you want that, and you want that pop filter for this as well. One thing for recording, like filming, for filming on set and things like that, if you have voiceover in your project, some of the times it's going to be recorded before you record the visuals, and sometimes it'll be recorded after. It just depends on the project. For instance, most animated projects have the voices recorded beforehand so that they can actually match the animation to the voice actors instead of the other way around. And because that, they're creating all that animation anyway, so they might as well create it to match the actor instead of the actor having to match their voice to the animation, which is a little bit harder. And also, if the character is in a live action project and they're reacting to a voiceover, like maybe it's an inner monologue going through their head, so they're changing their expressions or they're changing what they're doing in the room based on what that voiceover is saying, then that might be recorded beforehand and played during the take so the actor can actually react to it in real time. And that way, that way the timing is right as well. So that's something to keep in mind. If you have something like kind of integrated into your story that uses voiceover, I have one project that I want to work on at some point, and there's voiceover throughout the whole thing. And I know that I probably want to do it beforehand because I want to make sure the timing is right, that we record enough footage to match the length of the voiceover instead of recording everything and then seeing that there's not enough or there's too much and the timing is off, because it's a little bit harder to edit around. So for us, I think I will record it beforehand and then play it while we're filming the actual scene. And then all you do is in editing, you just use the actual voiceover file instead of whatever you're using on set. You just cut that part out and use the voice file instead to make it a lot better quality, because obviously it's not going to come out as good playing from a recording on set. That's just for the actor to react to. Or, some projects will also do it the other way around, where they'll record the visuals first and they'll just add, they'll record extra than they need, having a bit of a cushion so that just in case they aren't recording enough, they have a little bit of they might stay on a take for 5 seconds longer than they normally would. That way, if the voiceover is going on for longer than they thought, the performance is a little bit slower than they originally were thinking, they can still have a good timing of it and match it to it. And lastly, if they record the visuals first, then they might just have the voice actor match it. No matter what their performance would have been, they just need to match the speed of the recording. And whenever he picks up that soda can, that's when you say soda can. Then they just need to be sure that however they're timing the way they're saying it, however they're timing their performance, they match the soda can with him picking it up. And so those are the different ways to go about voiceover work when filming. If it's integrated, if it's just something like a voiceover narration over the top of some footage, and it doesn't really matter about the timing of the footage with the voiceover, then it's usually just post-production work. But if it's actually integrated into the scene where it needs to be timed with live visuals, then there's a few different ways to go about it, like I was saying. There's a few more. One thing they say is if you're doing voiceover, if you have an actor that's doing voiceover, just have them read out the script aloud before recording. Because like we were saying about ADR, even well-written sentences on a page may be difficult to speak. So they may be a little bit harder to say in real life just because of, I don't know, many different reasons, but it might sound good on a page and we can read things in our head and it sounds fine. But when we say them aloud, it tends to sound a little bit different or take a little bit longer or, be a little bit faster than what we were reading in our head. And so just them saying it aloud to make sure that they can do it without messing up will save a take from being ruined, which is more editing and everything like that. So just if you're doing it or if you're having an actor do it, just have them kind of rehearse a little bit before you even start really really recording it. I mean, just so they can kind of be in the right headspace and make sure they know the lines and that they're able to speak them very clearly and well. Another thing about voice acting or just voiceovers in general is it's going to be another time-consuming process most of the time, and you don't want the actor, or if you're doing the voiceover, you don't want you to have a dry mouth, because dry mouths make it a lot harder to get good voice acting, good voiceovers, and pronunciate correctly or speak normally. So you want to have something like apples or oranges, grapes, water, anything that's really hydrating and can help to keep the mouth hydrated so that it doesn't have that effect. It doesn't get dry and harder to speak and, a little bit coughing. That's why I always have a water with me when I'm doing these meetings, is because I'm speaking so much. And then at the end, I start messing up a little bit more because my mouth is getting more dry. I already drank my water and, things like that. So having apples and oranges and water and things that will hydrate the actor or hydrate yourself will really help to
One thing that I've heard from
maintain
voice
that consistency.
actors, one thing that I've heard from voice actors that do animation is that they have like a specific spray that they will have as well that will hydrate their throat and like relax their throat. There are like specific drinks that are super hydrating. Like they'll make sure to have a bunch of products with them as well to make sure that their throat isn't suffering, because it's not just hydration, but it's also strain. And the more strain you have, like if you're recording for multiple hours, it's gonna show up in your voice, even if you are keeping hydrated, So they have those resources as well that I've heard of.
Yeah, and it's always good if they are having problems or something to give them a little bit of a break, or to give yourself a little bit of a break if you're the one doing it, just so that you have a little bit of a rest between speaking and whatever else you're doing. So even if they don't need to go to the bathroom or need to eat or whatever, just little 2-5 minute break here and there will really help to keep them at the same level and maintain that consistent voice and the way they're speaking and how they're speaking and their performance at the same level. Just like with ADR, voiceover, you want to use headphones, preferably closed back, so that you're not hearing any outside noises coming in. All you're hearing is what's coming from the mic, what's being recorded. And that way you can hear everything going on and can adjust as necessary depending on if there's any problems or if it sounds great. If you have any soundproofing material, like those sound foam pieces that we were seeing or the sound blankets, use them. But remember, you can also use stuff like regular blankets, towels. All these things can be used to greatly reduce the reverb and echo. And since voiceovers are only audio, you can consider putting the talent in kind of a spot where there's like a blanket that encases them, or in a spot that doesn't really, it wouldn't look good on set, but it would be fine for just audio because you just want to get the best crisp quality audio you can. And so something kind of like this, even like if he had a blanket over his head and it's wrapped around where that mic is, this person, he's just doing it. He has the headphones and he's doing the sound blocking foam, I believe, and he has it wrapped around where the mic is. I've also seen, people where they just put a big blanket or a sound blanket on some stands right above their head and have that kind of wrap them in a little room, as if they were playing like fort, like making a fort. And it looks kind of like that, like you're a kid making a fort, and you want to do that just so that there's less reverb and less noise going around. And you can really just pick up the voice in that area, in that spot. It's kind of like being in a studio where, it's very enclosed space and it's very soundproofed. And so it's just there so that they can pick up just the voice, no other thing. And so those things are some things you can do to really help on a budget when you don't want a studio, when you don't have a home studio, when you don't want to rent a studio from a professional place. You can just get some sound dampening stuff or some regular blankets and just kind of put it all over the place. It might not look the most professional, but it doesn't matter because you don't need it for its looks. You need it for the audio. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of that? All right, so last thing we're going to talk about is Genny Operator, which is pretty quick, and I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to say that we are going to be doing a ADR or voiceover exercise. I mentioned this earlier, just making sure to repeat it. I will send out the email on it sometime, probably tomorrow. And all we're doing is taking some clip from somewhere, whether it's from our past stuff or from a movie we like, or from a movie we think would be fun to recreate. And then we're going to ADR it over it. You can use your voice, or if you have somebody else, you can have them do it. So long as you're getting used to ADR and you're ADRing whatever piece of footage That's all that really matters. And then adding some voiceover somewhere in there is another thing, just so you can see the differences between ADR and voiceover. ADR is a bit more time consuming just because it has to match the footage, when voiceover can just be done in whatever speed and tone you want. It's more about the performance than anything else, but ADR is about the performance matching the tone and matching the speed if you're trying to get it exactly like they did it in the footage that you are using. Or if you're trying to enhance or just make a different performance, but still have it match the lip syncing, that is also very hard to do. And so ADR is going to be the more time consuming part of the project, but it's going to be within the same exercise. Moving on. Genny Operator. Let me get to my notes real quick. So Genny Operators are part of the lighting department. They're very specific, and they're probably only used on mostly larger sets. You're not going to find them on too many independent films unless it's a more larger budget independent project, because it's very specialized and very specific. They're in charge of maintaining and operating electricity generators. So you can see that giant generator. They're also in charge of bringing them to set, driving the vehicles that are used to bring those to set, because some of them are so huge, you need certain equipment, like a trailer or like a U-Haul kind of vehicle to where you can put it in there and drive around. So they need to have the specific license for that. They're the ones that are going to actually take these to and from set, and they have to learn how to operate vehicles that are used to transport them, perform routine maintenance on the generators. They may carry out basic maintenance on the vehicle that transports the generator as well. Just make sure it's, they're able to bring it to and from set. So they always need their vehicle to be in good working order. So, a little bit of basic maintenance is good to have. They need to understand production lighting and power needs so that they can ensure the chosen generator is going to meet the specifications required. If the set is using 5 HMI lights and they're going to point them from all different spots because they want to have it look like it's a planet that has 5 suns, it's going to require a lot of power. And so they need to know how many generators to bring and what kind. So they need to know their different generators and know how much power they're going to give out and how much those HMI lights are going to consume power, so that they can make sure to get the right ones and have enough power for all of those lights and all of the other needs of the production. They need to have a full HGV license for the vehicles that are required to drive these things around most of the time. If they're just using like a truck with a trailer, I don't think they need a special license, but I'm not sure. It might depend on the state or the country. A normal lighting electrician can operate generators of up to 20 kilowatts, but anything larger than that requires that Genny operator specialist. They have to be 21 years or older. They're some of the ones to arrive first on a set. The first several hours of their day is going to be unloading, staging, fueling the generators and putting them in their correct places for production. And then they have to run hundreds of feet of feeder cable to numerous trailers and other department staging positions. These generators, depending on where you're at, if you're going into a desert and shooting, you're not going to have any power anywhere. So you have to bring a bunch of different generators and feed cables through that so that people can plug into outlets. And so the cables are going to be plugged into these generators, and there's really big, thick cables to make sure that they don't fall apart, because they're made for outdoors and they're made for things like this. They're very thick and heavy. They're about a pound for every foot, they said. And so these Genny operators need to plug them in and bring them all over set to different places. If you have actors in trailers, they have to bring it there to have electricity into the trailer. Things for the just regular production, like the what's it called? Like craft services, they're going to need some kind of lights. to set up their spot. Every department's going to need their own lighting and own electricity. And so they need to have either enough cabling going around to those different spots or have generators in place so that they can have the cabling going in different locations if the set is very spread out. And then, of course, these generators are also for actual production lights, which are going to most likely require the most power out of anything else. And so there needs to be enough of them in the right locations so that, or the cabling needs to be in the right location so that they can plug in those big lights and keep them maintained throughout the day and lit and have electricity for the whole set. Then after that, most of the rest of their production day is kind of just spent waiting around and maintaining the generators, refueling them when necessary because they're required fuel to provide that electricity, and just being there in case something goes wrong. So one of the people said it's kind of like watching paint dry because most of the time these generators don't really have anything wrong with them. And so after they're set up and good to go, the rest of the production day is pretty boring. But, you know, occasionally you'll run into problems and somewhere they'll lose electricity and you have to find the problem and all of that, but it's just a little less likely. So most of the time they're just there for like a just in case thing. After they finish setting them up, running the cabling and getting everybody good on their electricity needs, they kind of just sit around and wait for if they're needed. And that's pretty much it. Like, so their job is mainly just technical, and well, it's just technical, and it's very it's very laborious because you have to carry those heavy cables around and make sure you're getting those equipment and setting them up right. And you just need to know a lot about lighting and electricity to be able to have this kind of job function. And that is why they're not really used so much on the lower budget sets, because if you're a low budget, you can't really afford these things most of the time, depending on how big your budget is. So if you wanted to shoot in a desert, you have to like figure out how to do it really quickly to the point where you aren't going to need so much electricity, or maybe you're just going to use the sun for the lighting or whatever, but you're still going to have to figure out a way to get everyone there and all of that, and be able to use little electricity instead of having to use these big lights and these big and trailers and all these other things, because you're most likely not going to have all of that on a lower budget production. So that's why these guys, they're mainly just for the big budget stuff, but you might find them on some independent stuff as well, depending on how big their budget is. Yeah, is anyone going to have any questions or comments on that?
I keep responding like saying yes or no, and then I just remembered now that my thing was turned off.
Because you're muted.
Sometimes,
Oh, my head just hurts so bad.
What Vish?
Yeah, sometimes they have like a tent, you know, the monitor tent, or where the director or they have an outside outdoor shoots. They have
Video
these,
Village?
Video Village, right?
Yep.
And there that needs to be lit also. So they're using this gen sets to light them up, because they have a whole bunch of equipment there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did
And
you read
that's another thing about that. Like, they don't just need to know the lighting, how much power it takes, but also, the monitors and the whatever they're using, because Video Village is using so many different things to show what's going on and listen to what's going on. That's going to need a lot of different equipment plugged in. So they need to have a basic understanding of how much power consumption is being used from each piece of equipment as well, so they can make sure to bring the right thing to each location, so it doesn't blow out, or it doesn't have too little power to where they can't have electricity for what they need. Were you saying something, Priscilla?
I was gonna say, gosh, I'm sorry, my head is pounding right now. I was gonna say, did you read V's comment about vocal exercises? Because yeah, that's a good thing as well.
Oh yeah, vocal and lip. So if you're doing any voiceover work or ADR, it's also good to do vocal and lip exercises. I'm not really sure what lip trills are, but I'm sure you can look that up. What is that like when you like when you like hum through your lips? I know there's different kinds of like you'll see singers and stuff in this do these types of vocal exercises where they're making weird noises, and it's just to prepare their voice for
It's to open up your throat. It's to get your vocal cords stretched in a way. It can also be to get, especially like get everything ready, because depending on how you're sitting, or depending on how long you haven't opened your mouth, or even like how long you have been speaking or singing, there can be a strain. So exercises before and after, and some in between, really help to like work out those muscles, because at the end of the day your voice is a muscle, it is an instrument, it does take some care.
yeah, cool. So that's also a good tip if you're going to do any voiceover work, or you have somebody that's going to be your talent that's doing the voiceover work or the ADR, just to have them warm up, warm up, get into character as well, but also warm up in just their voice in general with those exercises and those kinds of things, so that they can get ready. Oh yeah, that's actually brings up a good point about ADRs. Another thing ADR like you'll find is um, the performances of music on a set or in a scene. They re-record all of that, and then have a more professional sounding recording of the music or the instrument or whatever they were doing on set, instead of using what they capture on set, since that's not going to sound as good. It's not going to sound um, as nice as like a band would.
Yeah, so what they will do is they will record the song in a studio first, and then when you're acting it out, like on a musical number, for example, they will basically lip sync it. But what they do recommend, especially if you're not used to lip syncing, is that you always kind of sing it or say it underneath your breath a little bit, or at least like very quietly to yourself, so that it still looks realistic, and you can also play it out in a more realistic way. So they will recommend that the person doing the singing will either like sing really quietly, or they will just like underneath their voice will just keep singing it while the music plays over. That way they can or at least lip sync, but like really, really quiet. I don't know how to explain it, but when you're like saying it without saying it type of thing.
Saying it under your breath.
Yeah, I think that's how it is. But yeah, so they'll recommend that, and then they will layer with the studio recording, or sometimes they will blend both together, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. So yeah, like there's a bunch of different ways about going about all of these kinds of things, with audio and ADR and all of that. So it's just keep in mind, if whatever project it has, if you're going to be in a really busy street, if you're shooting outside and heavy traffic, and there's going to be a bunch of noises of honking and all these cars, try to get good audio, but just know that there's also ADR so that you can make it better sounding in post. It's just going to take a lot of time, and so be prepared for that. And if you are paying the people, work that into your budget, because you're most likely going to need ADR if you're in a very noisy place and you're going to be in a noisy place. If that's like the only place you can shoot at, or that's just the place you decided to shoot because you really like the way it looks, but you don't like the way it sounds, ADR is going to be what you're going to use most likely. And then, and so what else was I going to say? Well, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, so you'll use these tools a lot just to help enhance your story. And oh, that's what I was gonna say. If you're using voiceover integrated into your scene, so ADR is if you know you're gonna need ADR after you're in a busy location, or you don't have the best sound person and you know that, or whatever reason you know you're gonna need ADR, just work that into your budget, work that into your time, your schedule. And if you're doing voiceover work, just be prepared to know that that's going to take some time as well, and that's going to be a little bit more on the budget. But also, do you want to record it beforehand and play it during the set? Is it something integrated into the scene where the timing is impeccable, or is it something where it can just be overlaid over any kind of footage and it doesn't really matter when those things are said or what's shown while those things are said? Then you can work that out if you want to record the voiceover before or after. And if you have any music like that, then like Priscilla said, you'll probably be recording that beforehand and then having the person on set lip sync with it. So all I wanted to mention is that Monday we are watching another movie, and this one's going to be for its sound design and its mix. So if anyone has any suggestions, again, we're going to be doing it through either Netflix, Hulu. Priscilla has a free subscription of Hulu right now. Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, YouTube free. So if the movie's on one of those, let us know. If it's something that has a really good sound design or mix, or you consider it too, or if it won awards for its sound, then let us know. I know of a few that I'm thinking of, but we'll do another vote. We'll try to send it out sometime this weekend for the vote, so it's not on Monday.
Yeah,
we'll be
it's
watching
just
that.
we were waiting for people to give us recommendations, and one person, I think one or two people did, but no one else did, and so we were like, okay, we'll have I guess Monday morning we'll text everyone and see if anyone wants to either give a last minute vote or we'll vote on the ones we chose. But like I said, we've been sick since Monday, and our schedule's been all over the place with work and the production and everything. So we're sorry for that, but also, yeah, it's a mix of people not responding in time and us also with our schedule crazy. So
Yeah. So anyway, so for Monday, we don't need to study anything. We're just gonna watch a movie and study its sound. And that isn't going to be used for any assignment or anything. It's just for us to study sound more in depth. But our assignment, our exercise is going to be the voiceover and ADR exercise, which will be taking 15 to 30 seconds clip from something, whether it's something you recorded in the past or from a movie or from a YouTube video or whatever. And you're going to ADR over the voice that's already there. And then you are going to add voiceover somewhere in there, depending on, or you can even add different footage if you want to add voiceover, if it doesn't work for whatever kind of footage you're using. ADR over the existing stuff, try to lip sync it as best as possible and match it, and voiceover for parts that don't have the lips in place, or it's supposed to be like in the person's mind, or however you want to go about doing it.
And guys, I encourage you to have some fun with this. This is an exercise that it's mostly just sound work. So you can take a scene and add some funny voiceover on top of it. You can make the scene funnier. Who hasn't? I'm sure most people have had this experience where you're I don't know if you've ever done this as a kid or as a teenager, but you will it's very stupid, but whatever. You will hear you'll have the scenes and you'll act out what they would be saying, or you've seen those clips, if they were honest or whatever, or people on YouTube. They do it a lot. I think they did it with not Castlevania. They did it with the Dracula another vampire anime that I always forget which one it is. But they did it with this anime where they dubbed it in a different kind of way, dubbed the episodes, and it was really funny, and it was really good, and it's still in kept with the story. You don't have to if you don't want to. You can just take a random scene and put some sound over it, your voice over it, and do it however you want. But they did it in a way where they kind of like played all the characters. They had all these different people play these different characters, and it still made sense in the story. They just made it funnier. And I thought that was really cool. So yeah, just have fun with it, you know, take a scene, something you already have, or something you seen online, a video, and put your voice over it, and let's see how it is. Have some fun.
Yeah, for the ADR part, you want to match their lips, though. That's the only thing. Matching the lips for ADR, but for the voiceover part, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. ADR is just so you can see the syncing and how difficult it is, like how hard it's going to be to get that right, so that you don't try to rely on that for your next project, because that's something you shouldn't do.
And that is something I will say we've gotten that has been so helpful with these exercises that we've been doing these past few semesters, at least to me. It's just been so cool to see just how much goes into it and value it a little bit more. And it's just been really cool to have that experience and see how much goes into it. And I'm like, holy crap, this is a lot of work, but it made me appreciate it more. It made me value it and understand it a lot better. And yeah, it's just really cool to have that experience, so that we don't have to have that experience on set if we ever have to work with someone that's doing that area, or if we have, someone asks us to help them with that. We have some experience in our home trying it out, so that we don't embarrass ourselves in public. It's better to embarrass yourself at home than to embarrass yourself in public.
And yeah, I agree. And I like the movies a lot, because just watching them for different aspects, I think it's really cool. They really start to stand out when you're watching it for a specific thing than if you were just watching a movie regularly. So I like watching it and seeing like how much went into each thing. I also like pointing out if they made any mistakes. I think that's fun. Even like big budget movies make mistakes, and it's cool to see, because then you don't have to worry too much about it when you do it.
Yeah, and you don't
should still
take
worry
it too
about it, but you don't have to worry
seriously.
as much, because it's done on big budget movies and it's clear that it's ADR or something. But they did it anyway, because it's just, sometimes mistakes happen even on big budget.
Yeah, it helps you see that even the big productions, even the big budget movies do it sometimes too. And sometimes it's just fun to joke around like, wow, that was bad. Not in a way of like trashing, because I know some people can take it way too, like, well, you do it better. Like, no, it's just for fun, and knowing that, even big actors have crappy movies sometimes. Even big directors make mistakes sometimes. Like, it's just fun sometimes to see that. And like, even everyone makes mistakes and has those little things, and you can still enjoy a movie and admit that it has flaws and that it's not perfect, and that's okay.
Last
Just
thing I want to mention is everyone helping us on our production. We have sent out the forms now, so if you guys could sign those and send them back. I know there's been a few of you that have, but for the rest who haven't yet, please sign those and send them back, and then we'll send the script. Next Wednesday is the script breakdown meeting, and I'll give out the names of the people who need to be there, and then anyone else is welcome to come, but they don't have to be. But if they're able to, they can. But yeah, that's what we're doing. And Priscilla
like
and
I
I've
said,
like we said earlier, we've been pretty busy working on everything. We're trying to post for the actors. We're trying to post for a sound guy or a sound
we're
girl
trying to
or
get
whatever.
as much
Sound person.
done. Yeah, we're trying to get
So we're
as much
trying
done as
to get a
possible.
lot of these things done and break down the script ourselves and all of this. So we're pretty busy, but if you have any questions or anything, just let us know and communicate with us so that we can help you and know that you're understanding what your role is or what you need to do.
And hopefully, like, this week is very, very jam-packed, because we're doing a lot and we're contacting a lot. But the next few weeks, I will be better at responding like as soon as possible, and just better at getting. It's just so much right now that we're doing, and because we're sick, we're not getting enough sleep, or we're getting too much sleep. Our sleep's all over the place. We're going to bed at like 7 a.m. And so it's just been a lot, but I will we've done so much, and I'm really proud of that, and I'm really happy that we're this far in. But yeah, it's not where I would like it to be as far as like my communication I'd like it to be a little bit better. So I apologize for that, and I'm next week it will definitely be better because we'll have less on our plate.
All right, that's all for the recording.